Here are examples of moments when Joe Rogan challenged his guests on his show.
That's a choice. An actual woman? Yeah, I said actual. Off.
Gender's not just genitals, it's in your mind.
This video showcases moments where Joe Rogan engaged with guests on woke topics during his show. It opens with Adam Conover, who faced criticism for his views on trans children. The discussion started when Joe questioned Adam about his stance on trans athletes, to which Adam responded that he saw no problem with trans individuals participating in sport.
Trans athletes, that is a sporting world that I'm more interested in.
Joe challenged Adam's point, arguing that it is unfair for a biological woman to compete against a biological man in sports.
Not taking steroids or any sort of performance-enhancing drugs, but then someone comes along that was a man for 30 years and decides that they're going to be a woman, and this has happened, and literally transitioned a few months ago, and competes as a woman and destroys records and dominates you in that sport. It's not fair. It's as much cheating as taking.
Although Joe makes a compelling argument, Adam responds by asserting that a truly level playing field is unattainable.
I don't think that there is such a thing as a perfectly level playing field. I think we decide what kind of playing field we want to have.
Sure, but we do make the distinction where we don't allow men to compete in women's divisions.
And I think that distinction may...
Adam advocates for breaking down gender boundaries, but Joe Rogan challenges him with a tough question. Should men be allowed to compete in women's weightlifting?
Should be able to compete in the women's division of weightlifting?
No, I don't necessarily. But
they can.
When Joe points out that men can participate in women's sports by transitioning, Adam shifts the focus, arguing that since some individuals begin transitioning as early as 7, the biological differences will eventually diminish.
Transition much earlier age, you know.
But then...
and so if someone is transitioning from the age of 7 years old, right? Working with those hormones, from that age, right? They're not going to have, their body situation is going to be very different than the one that you.
Joe disagreed with the idea of transitioning children, arguing that 7-year-olds are too young to fully understand their identity.
To give kids hormones, and there's no reason to decide before a person's frontal lobe is completely fully developed, which doesn't even take place till 25.
Adam mentions his friend with a trans child, arguing that since the child identifies as a girl, hormone treatment is essential and not a matter of choice. However, Joe disagrees.
He's explained that my child from a very young age consistently said, I am a girl, and has never contradicted themselves, never changed their mind. And so the humane thing and the thing that he felt was good to do as a parent was to embrace that choice on his child's part, right?
Embrace that choice meaning hormonally.
I shouldn't even phrase it as a choice, embrace that identity.
Okay, but if that's who they are, if they think that they're a girl, why do you have to give them hormones to make...
When Adam is confronted with a straightforward question, he hesitates, giving Joe the opportunity to completely shut him down.
I'm sorry, can you expand on the question?
It's a simple question. If you say that the child thinks it's a girl, so you're going to give the child hormones. If the child thinks it's a girl, let it be a girl. You don't have... Why are you adding hormones? If you're shooting hormones into a child, and you're affecting the child's development, you're saying that's not a choice. That's nonsense. Of course it's a choice. You're choosing to chemically change this child's body, and you're saying...
This isn't a choice. Well, it's definitely a choice to make that argument without much to back it up. The feedback on the video was overwhelmingly negative. Viewers joked that if they had a penny for every time Adam admitted he wasn't an expert, they could afford to hire a real expert to prove him wrong. It was clear Adam didn't fully grasp the topic and was thoroughly outmatched. However, he did respectfully listen to Joe's points without interrupting, unlike the next guest, Pete Dominic, who boldly suggested that the U.S. Constitution should be rewritten.
Serious conversation about what kind of guns and bullets people can have is so much better.
Pete has good intentions and advocates for reforms to reduce gun violence in America, but the key question is how to collect all the firearms. Studies consistently show that there are too many guns in the U.S. to confiscate them all. Joe Rogan argues that it's impossible, while Pete supports government buyback programs as a solution.
Any guns, you're not getting them all. It's not possible.
That's the most important point. There's already 330. There's more guns than there are people, so what do? I think you buy as many as you can back for sure. You spend a whole bunch of taxpayer money.
If you wanted to do that without changing the Second Amendment. Like you just have a buyback where you just offer people the opportunity to make some money by...
At this point, Pete Dominic interrupts Joe's point with a smug attitude, shifting the conversation by asserting that the Second Amendment has been misinterpreted.
Interpreted wrong by the Supreme Court, in my opinion. I mean,
Talk about the Second Amendment. I mean, it's a big conversation.
no, because people can have guns. You can have guns. The Rick has a right to have guns. You just can't have these.
You just can't have these guns. It's clear Pete is growing more frustrated, while Joe stays calm and composed. Pete continues to interrupt and shift his stance, contradicting himself with each statement. He begins by claiming the problem lies with the guns and the bullets.
No, it's the guns and the bullets.
The guns and the bullet are inanimate objects. Without a person pulling the trigger, we're talking nonsense here.
He then changes his stance, calling it a healthcare issue just half a minute later.
The conversation about like the freedom, like the Second Amendment to me is, it's just your interpretation. Fine, whatever your interpretation is fine.
That's what's interesting
but
about it.
But there's a human impact. It's a healthcare issue, it's so extreme. It's really, if you want to know the answer to healthcare issues, you talk.
He then shifts his stance again, labeling it a healthcare issue just half a minute later.
Research on what?
Well, they don't have enough research on. They don't have enough research on gun violence.
But what
unfortunately.
Are you talking about then?
I'm talking about if you want to know the solutions for what is impacting and creating death by any measure, accidental death.
Right, but we're talking about gun violence, right?
Right.
What healthcare professionals have the solutions to gun?
Unfortunately, you're talking about something else. I'm talking about the solutions to what's causing death, whether accidental or not. But we're discussing gun violence, right? What healthcare professionals have the solutions to gun violence? This debate was clearly dominated by Joe Rogan, who easily outperformed his opponent. In contrast, our next guest, Flint Dibble, had a very different experience. He became involved in a heated exchange during episode 2136 of Asterisk, the Joe Rogan Experience Asterisk with Graham Hancock. The argument was sparked by articles accusing Graham of being a racist and a white supremacist.
Used for those reasons.
So are you saying your quote is incorrect?
I think that it's editing me out of context, Graham. I've never called you a white supremacist.
Force white supremacist ideas, stripping indigenous people with a rich heritage, and instead giving credit to aliens or white people. None of those things are true.
I know, Graham doesn't even talk about aliens.
Right, but
and
what?
so
Did
that's
you
why I'm
say that?
I said that not in specific relation to Hancock's claims, but in specific relation to this narrative of Atlantis that has gone back hundreds of years. Graham reinforces white supremacist ideas. As I've said,
So this quote is not real?
They stripped the stories of Atlantis? Yes, right?
So the quote reinforce white supremacist ideas, that's not yours.
No, that's not a quote. It's not a quotation.
Right, it was in the other article. Quote,
This is your own article, Flint. Here you are. I'm quoting from, that's a quote from your article published in The Conversation. This sort of race science is outdated and long since debunked, especially given the strong links between Atlantis and Aryans proposed by several Nazi archaeologists. You are associating me with this, and you are attempting to get me
No, I'm asking
cancelled
you to
effectively.
distance yourself from that.